Hello, and welcome to Mixed Media. On this episode, we will be doing reviews again from different forms of art we found on Reddit. As you can see, we have a special guest coming from our 2 episodes ago, actually, from one of the movies we reviewed. If you'd like, introduce yourself first.
Hi, yeah, my name's Jason David.
All right, and yeah, I guess we can go through introductions of the rest of ourselves. So I am Nathan. I am a game developer and 3D modeler.
I'm Ben Costello. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm Ben Costello. I'm a flutist, flautist, flute player, whatever you want to call that, and a media composer.
Is flutist the right term, or is it actually flautist?
In Europe, people tend to say flautist, and in America, people tend to say flutist. And I just tend to avoid all confusion by saying media. Media. I'm thinking whatever. I tend to avoid confusion by saying flute player if I don't know who I'm talking to. But most people say flutist in America. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was wondering if that nameplate's been wrong for a long time or something like that.
Oh no, it's correct given the fact that we are in America.
Gotcha. Well, I'm Irving. I'm a media entrepreneur / filmmaker. I own a production company called Ariella. Oh, I don't have my hat on today. I was going to do a merch plug, but I'll save you the pain of having me plug my company. And yeah, we're Mixed Media. This is the awesome thing we do every Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where we discuss anything art related. We come from our own particular spaces of art, / art entrepreneurship and all that kind of stuff. But we like to talk about art in general and invite you into that conversation. That's why we like doing it as a live podcast. And I'm really excited today because we have something new, which is interviewing someone, which is the first time we're doing this on the podcast, and I'm super stoked. It looks like we got a few people popping in as well. So hello, everyone. I guess I'll start my segment. So what we do on reviewing Reddit is we find stuff that we see on the internet. It doesn't really have to be Reddit, but that's a nice place to go to find communities of people who are sharing their stuff. So, I'm snooping on, r/short films, watching a bunch of stuff. And I like to pick out stuff that I find interesting. And, hello. Yeah, submit through Discord. There you go. I like to pick out stuff that, interests me. I think that we all can learn from, in terms of the good. And, maybe some things we can learn from in terms of the bad stuff. This time, we have, mostly good stuff to say. Cool. This film, had me hooked from front to back, and I was really enjoying it. And I said, I normally try to avoid things as long as 30 minutes. So it's a 30-minute long short. So obviously I'm not going to be playing the whole thing here, but, I had to do it because I thought it was that interesting. I wanted to break it down.
Well, thanks very much, man.
Yeah, no problem.
Question: What exactly defines a short then in terms of its length? Because that doesn't sound like it sounds like a longer end of a short. So what's the line between a short and something that's not a short?
I think the Academy definition is less than 40 minutes, if I'm not mistaken. There's this weird dead zone between 40 and an hour or something. I'm not sure. Which you should probably not make a film that length anyway. Am I wrong? I don't know.
No, I think that's right. Please stop me if I'm jumping ahead, but I think the 30-minute runtime, in a way, sort of hamstrung us with festivals. Got a lot of short film festivals put together viewings in blocks, so it's it'll be blocks of 7, 8, 9, 10-minute films maybe. So a 30-minute film is sort of in it's almost like a dwarf feature more than anything else. It's not. It doesn't really showcase what the goal of a lot of short films is.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. I know. Basically, what he's saying with the blocks is sometimes they'll set aside. Depends on the film festival. Sometimes they'll set aside 30 minutes, or sometimes they'll set aside an hour, and they want to film that 30-minute or hour block. Let's say with horror films, or let's say with best music nominations or something like that. And so if you have like a long film, they have to sacrifice showing like, let's say 2 or 3 shorter films to show your longer film. So it's almost as if you have to be like twice as good, right? Is a way to think about it.
Yeah, I think that's right.
Yeah. So yeah, before you continue to be a stranger to everyone who's on the stream, tell us about yourself, your relationship to the film. The film is Bum Promises. There's a link in the description, actually. So if you want to check that out, it's long. So by the time I get to breaking it down, you probably won't be able to finish it. But the link is in the description. But yeah, would you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah. So I'm Jason. I was a writer and producer. I was the writer and one of the producers on the movie. I adapted it from a one-act play that I had produced at the University of Southern California in 2015 with Mark Rosenzweig, who directed that production and then also directed the film.
Yeah, that's really cool. That was going to be my next question. I saw that it was adapted from a play, and I was wondering, how that came about. So, what made you decide to go from play to screenplay?
I think it was so I was in the theater department at USC, but I was friends with a lot of film people, and I'd say I wrote the script as a stage play because I was able to sort of like execute like the low level, no budget version of that on stage, and I certainly wouldn't have been as a short film, but I think the influences on the script are more filmic than they are theatrical. So when we were coming to the end of our senior year of college, Mark and myself and a couple other guys began to view that as a sort of like an ad hoc thesis project for graduating. Was to film this thing and make it a short film through our friend Mike's, and also Mark is also a part owner, and then later I myself became one of the Zephyr Entertainment Network, which is Mike Smith's production company based in LA. So that was sort of a venture into I guess narrative filmmaking for that company and for all of us on a non-academic level.
Ah, it's pretty cool, yeah. So when did you graduate? So was that be like 2015, 2016 or something like that?
Yeah, so we graduated in we graduated in May of 2016, and I actually skipped the graduation ceremony to fly to North Carolina ahead of everybody else and start scouting locations and stuff for the movie.
Cool, yeah. Yeah, no, that's pretty cool. Yeah, and I guess a lot of people, especially from a lot of the filmmakers that we talked to last time, they're younger. They're I don't even think they're thinking. They might not be thinking about college yet. I'm not sure. But some of the people we had on last time, the younger end, and they might be thinking about going to film school. I didn't go to film school, but what are your thoughts about film school in general? I know that's like a hot topic in general.
So I didn't. I graduated with a BA in theater, which, I don't know. I would say it's of limited value. I guess part of it depends on the types of financial resources you have. It's like, the types of loans or financial aid that you might get that would allow you to go to film school and experiment with those sort of filmmaking technologies and methods there, and also to interact with the sort of people who are going to be going in that professional field. There may not be other ways to, because the sort of populist thing to say is, oh, if you want to make movies, just go and make movies. But I don't know if you're getting access to things like the types of cameras and sound equipment that they get to use, and the same types of people. So I don't know. I wouldn't say I'm an authority on it. Mark actually also graduated from the theater school with me. I think Mike, our producer, would be probably able to give a more thorough answer on what he thinks is the utility, I guess, of going to film school. But if you want, I could get. I know you've been mostly in touch with Mark. I could also reach out to Mike and sort of see what he has to say on the subject and pass that along to you after we have off the call.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I'll put that in the top comment or something like that. I'll put what the response is about film school. Yeah, so what was the process then? Because it's a multi-stage process. So I guess how did the story develop? I I come from well, I started in like VFX, then I went into directing because I was like, okay, I think I really want to tell stories. I think that's where I belong. And then I, really started diving into writing. So it's really cool to have you on because that's what I've been talking about the most lately. Um, so what was your process in brainstorming to, putting the words down? How'd that go?
So I definitely always, let's see, I started writing it, I guess, when I was, so very first started writing the idea when I was probably around 19, and then we filmed it when I was 22. Before that, obviously it's not that long of a time, but would always write things that could never like hook into anything. But the main character in this movie of Bones, and I think he had a couple other names before he was ultimately named that, was the first sort of character whose voice I could hook into, and it was sort of an amalgam of. I'm a big fan of folk music, so there's sort of tied into a lot of personas from Americana music. There are a lot of figures sort of on the fringes of society, or like habitual criminals or gamblers and stuff like that, with a certain dialect that I was affecting for the voice of that character, and also sort of I was I was watching the first season of True Detective a lot, and that was there's sort of the metaphysical rambling that I think ends up being tied into the Bones character. So started writing it just as monologues at first, and then sort of figuring out ways that a character like that could interact with a character who was more like myself. What were the circumstances that would make someone like me vulnerable to a character like Bones? Sort of teasing out the plot that way. Wrote a draft of it that I would have. I'm trying to figure out the timeline. That would have been reading that in the winter of, or maybe either the winter of 2013 or 2014, and then rewrote it a lot over the course of the next year, and then that's when we did the stage production, and then that would have been the spring of 2015, and then basically from January of 2016 through production was just writing and rewriting the film version of the script. So the basic shape of the story, like what happens in the movie, is basically what happens in the play. I think there are probably some small changes, but not really. But then the shape of that story that unfolded in the play took place between 2013 and early 2015.
Yeah, that makes sense. Cool. And was it a painful process? Some people describe teasing out a story from their brain as like a kind of like excruciating process of sort of shedding from yourself a lot of personal stuff. So
yeah, there was definitely some of that, and also just I was particularly early on, I was working excruciatingly. I was neglecting schoolwork and working like very long hours on the script, and then the script just wasn't very good. So that definitely stung a lot, because it's like you go into these things with these preconceptions that you're a talented person or whatever, and it's just like hours and hours and hours of input, and then the output was just bad. And like I had a reading of it with some of the other people from my theater department when it was still a play, and I just remember feeling pretty embarrassed by a lot of the stuff that was in it. So yeah, it was painful in that sense. As far as like yeah, I'd say it was particularly since it was the first major thing that I had worked on, it was a sort of more just all-consuming process compared to some of the stuff that I've worked on since then, which has been like much more sort of workmanlike and sort of sectioned off, and I know why I'm working on it, and I know how to work on it productively and stuff like that. Yeah, a lot of that just had to do with being a kid, for sure.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. What have you been doing since this film? Yeah, what's because it's a long journey. I don't think a lot of people realize, even for short films, they can take really long journeys, to being produced. So yeah, how have you changed, and what have you been up to while that's been going on?
So I'm actually so after writing the movie, I came to New York, and I've been here pretty much for the duration of that time since I moved here in August of 2016. I spent basically what would have been the school year from 2017 to 18 working in children's theater in upstate New York in Auburn, and then since then I've pretty much just been living and working in New York and doing a lot of stand-up comedy.
Cool.
I've written a couple other scripts in collaboration with those guys from Zephyr, and we produced another short film a couple years ago, a comedic short film me and my girlfriend wrote called Backpack. That's also on the Zephyr website. But other than that, my main thing, doing a lot of stand-up comedy, and still writing various things, scripts and other stuff. But whereas Mark and Mike have stayed much more directly involved in film production out in Los Angeles.
Cool. Are you originally from New York, or?
No, I'm originally from Atlanta, Georgia. Actually, I was born and raised there before moving. Sorry, I'm like self-conscious about the microphone. You can hear me fine, right?
Oh, I can hear you fine. Yeah, you can put the mic in shot. It doesn't matter.
Right. Okay. I just want to stop leaning out of frame.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, born and raised in Atlanta, Georgia. Went to school at USC, and then have been living in New York since then.
Cool. Gotcha. Yeah, and how has the film festival run gone? And well, actually, first, how did you roll it out? Like, did you have a plan beforehand, plan of attack to the film festival circuit, or did you just, kind of go for it? Yeah, how was that?
I think we submitted to a lot of the most prestigious ones first. I wish I could give you more detail on this because just because Mike was in Los Angeles and Mark and Mike were in Los Angeles and were much more directly in control of the post-production process. I believe, and I will reach out to them to make sure there's any corrections on this, but you sort of submit to the most prestigious ones first because, entry into, if you apply to them all at the same time and then you get into, the Anchorage, whatever film festival, I don't even know if there's a real one, but if you get into a less prominent film festival and then also get into Slam Dance or something, then it actually compromises their desire to premiere at Slam Dance if you get into Anchorage. But we didn't get into, I don't think we got into any of the most prestigious ones, and then we did another round of submissions, and I sincerely can't remember which festivals it got into. But then, so we went through multiple rounds of film festivals. It definitely it premiered at a few. I think we got a few awards and things like that. And then ultimately, I believe when you would have found it is after we released it on YouTube, where it's. I've logged on and been shocked by how many people have seen it, but it's had some sort of life in a internet short film community. So that's been pretty cool because you do stuff like this, and whatever your ambitions are, there's a lot of things short of that that can happen. But we're very much, I think we're all very proud of the product that we made, and then the fact that it has had just an amount of viewership is, when I think about it, it's definitely it's a pretty wonderful thing for sure.
Yeah, no.
I'm surprised and happy that you found it. I think Mark remains very active on Reddit and circulating it and stuff. I think that helps a lot.
Yeah, that's a smart strategy for sure.
And
what?
Worked with this podcast.
Yeah, exactly.
Sure did.
Yeah, so what was it like seeing it for the first time brought to life on the screen? Were you involved very much in the production process? Were you on set? And then throughout that, when you got to the end and you saw it on screen, what was that like?
Yeah, so I was the I obviously wrote it and was one of the producers on it. My role in the area where we film is it's actually in what was that house was my parents' summer house in Cashers, North Carolina, and we filmed all around that area. We filmed in Cashers and I think Dillsboro and around Bryson City and maybe Silva a little bit. So before filming started, I flew from California to Atlanta. I was not the one who picked up the equipment, but I got some stuff. So I was in charge of some prop and some design stuff, and I scouted a bunch of locations. And then sort of the core production team, Mike, Mark, Haven, Johnson, who also composed the music, and James Goldberg, who was also a producer, all flew out, and maybe one or two other people, but I think that was the core of the production team. And then so I would go around with Mark, and I had options for some of the locations to film some of the scenes. He would go, that's a good spot, that's good. Narrowed down where we would be filming. Haven and I believe Mike or someone, they like went down to Atlanta because a lot of the rental houses, we were renting film equipment out of Atlanta and then driving it up to North Carolina. So we got a big production truck, one of those like big white cube trucks full of poles and shit, and drove it up to North Carolina. So we had that parked at the house. We sort of we coordinated as best we could with the neighborhood about the fact that we would be filming, and a lot of these are people that I had known since I was a little kid. So for the most part, people in the area were very excited and happy for me that we were doing this. So that part was easy, and then I was basically what would you call it? I was an on-set producer, so I was like solving day-to-day problems and collaborate, moving people around and getting equipment to certain places. Producer, PA, we were all kind of doing everything because it's a shoestring project. And then I was also pretty much, for the most part, acting as a script supervisor. I was making sure that the lines were correct on set. There was one thing. So you remember the opening shot is with a train.
Yep.
So that was the Great Smoky Mountain Railroad in Bryson City. We drove out a couple days in advance to find the place that would look good for that opening shot. We found that crossing, and Mark and I, we went to Bryson City when the train was leaving, and we timed out how long it would take to get from the station to the crossing. And then, so that was just us in our car. And then on the day we filmed, we got there a few hours early to set up and everything. But when we got ready to shoot it, and I was just like, so this is where Mark was a great director. I was very just not wanting to go through any logistical difficulties to accomplish anything. So like at one point there was a question of whether we were going to be able to get a pickup truck for certain things, and he was like, "Yeah, we need the pickup truck." And with this, there was a question of like whether, because we had no permits, there's no, we were not allowed to be doing this, like filming around a train set.
Right.
So there was questions about whether this is the smart thing to do, and Mark was like, "No, we're just going to figure it out." So I had to go. This is like Deep Hick, North Carolina. I went down to like 100, 200, whatever it was, 300 yards before the train tracks, and I just had to stop cars and like lie to them about what we were doing there, and ask them to just stop and not cross. And then we got the shot, thankfully. But then this house that was near the train tracks saw what we were doing, and they were just suspicious or were bored or whatever, and they called the sheriff.
Oh no!
So we all, we got the shot, and then we all had to like jump in trucks and drive away. And one of the guys, Rob, I'm forgetting his last name. I'm sorry, Rob. But he was there as assistant camera and just part of the production team. He drove away with the sheriff tailing him, but. So just to make sure I got out of town. But in the back of his car, he just had like, nothing happened. He didn't get pulled over, but we had like a bag of prop methamphetamine. That was just like, if he gotten pulled over, there just would have been a bag of something that looked specifically like it's supposed to be meth in his car. So that was like that was very much the most sort of independent film moment. It's just like illegally getting that shot and getting chased out of town by the sheriff. That was a very movie moment for sure. But yeah, just a lot of stuff like that.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's like as dramatic as the film happening on set.
It's and sort of very backwoods stuff.
Yeah. Before I ask you to sort of summarize the story, really kind of left field question, but we like to do these things on the show where we give our hot takes on things. So, do you have what is your hottest take on anything in the film industry, media related, whatever?
Oh, in the film industry?
Well, you're welcome to say whatever you want, but
Um, I, I don't know. I feel like audiences are somehow getting more pretentious, but also stupider, if that makes sense. Because it's like when you go back into, and I don't mean to be nostalgic. There's a lot of movies that have come out in the past few years that I love, like a lot, but
of
they're
course,
very small and they're directed at small, like vanishingly small audiences.
yeah.
And I was watching I was watching Midnight Cowboy the other night, which is an incredibly, dark movie about a guy who like comes to New York to like to be a male prostitute, and he's basically living like a borderline homeless life in New York in the late '60s, and it's just an absolute bummer of a movie, like horribly depressing. But then it was a huge hit at the time and a phenomenon. And I think part of that had to do with whatever people's like in the entire country were like trying to figure out what the fuck was going on in New York at the time. But the fact that a movie like that, just like utterly dark subject matter, like utterly adult themes, and of extremely bleak ending, was a huge box office success, is so strange to think about when you consider that like now it's like, big successful movies are basically for children, and then adults like also go and see them. I just think that's so strange, and sort of movies that are about adults and adult things all get made for like, $2 million and are shot around like 3 locations with 7 actors total in the movie. And 90 people see them, and then 4 journalists are like, "Oh, it's the best thing ever," and then no one ever talks about them again. It's just very strange how small the cultural impact of film has gotten, particularly because you go back. I don't know. It's just there's so many great movies, and for all people talk about the shrinking attention span, a movie is 2 hours long and then it's over, as opposed to these fucking shows that go on for 7 years and you have to keep like, I don't know. It's just such a different form of consumption.
Oh yeah, 100%.
I think we can agree on that one.
Yeah, I think this is exactly what you said is pretty much what we've been talking about for the past like however many months.
It's very strange. I just got Criterion, and it's like, which is so fun, and being able to watch, not just old movies, but also just like cool movies from around the world, and it's just I don't know. To me, it's such a populous medium, and one of the great things about living in New York is you have all these art houses that show movies that if you were just bring them in casual conversation, people would be like, "Oh, that's for artsy nerds or whatever," which to a certain extent it is. But when you watch them with a big group of people, you're like, "Oh, these are all for everybody," and like more so 100%. Than like a lot of the movies for adults are made today are for everybody.
Yeah, no, it's. I don't think it's a matter of like things being like inaccessible in terms of the audience being able to ingest things properly. I mean, we're exposed to so many different kinds of stuff, different mediums, from really short form to like you said, like these endless shows, all kinds of genres. It's never been more diverse, but at the same time, it's never been more narrow in terms of what the mainstream consumes, which is extremely bizarre. So it's like audiences can ingest, pretty much anything. It's just people don't know what's out there, and I'll watch some things with either my wife or some friends, and they'll like be skeptical and they'll be riveted the entire time because it's just a good film. It's not just an artsy film; it's a good film.
It's true, but it's hard to get people to I don't know. Oh, dude, I thought it was so funny. I was talking to my girlfriend about this yesterday. Did you see the? Maybe I'm contradicting myself with this, but did you see the In the Heights movie?
No, I have not. No.
It's it's fine, but it's just it was so interesting when you think about how many stages of production that went through that no one went, hey, do you think maybe it's going to be tough to make money on an $80 million musical based on like a thing that? Sorry, my cat's about to. I can't believe they thought they were going to make money on that. Hold on, he's about to fuck up. Yeah, I don't know. So the actual film business, I think, is I'm not in it. I'm not like successful in it, so I don't necessarily feel qualified to speak on it in any detailed terms. But just as a consumer of movies, it's so strange what gets made and how it gets distributed, and what makes something successful.
100%, and I can agree with you on that. Same vantage point. Yeah, so, do you want to give a little summary if your cat's not eating you?
No, she's fine. She's just going to sit on the laptop. So the movie is about a drifter who calls himself Bones. He's sort of loose in the wilderness of the North Carolina mountains, and he.
Oh, are you on mute? Oh, I muted you. My bad. Give me 1 second. Live editing problems like usual. Give me 1 second. There you go. You can speak now.
You can, where should I just start over?
You said in the Smoky Mountains, and then
yeah. So this guy Bones, he's loose. He's seemingly on the run from something. He meets this guy Stubbs, who just camps in the woods, is living out in the woods, and from Stubbs he hears that this locally famous folk singer, Arlo Green, I think is the name. It's been a while. Has died, and that his strange children are back in town to attend to the funeral. Bones hears the story, and then with a seemingly factually questionable tale about Bones's dad playing with Arlo sometime in the past, sort of ingratiates himself with Arlo's children, Delia and Curtis, in order, presumably, to get some money from them in order to get away from whatever forces he thinks are pursuing them, and then hijinks ensue.
Yeah, it's a good layered story in the sense that there's different angles you're coming at things at different times. So in short, I really enjoyed the writing because I thought it was not stuck in sort of like that 3-act formula. I don't know how you decide to structure it, or if you thought about structuring it at all, or you just let the story naturally come, or.
I think there's a thing that I wrote right after, or I guess there's a thing right after I wrote the play that was sort of broken much more successfully into the 3-act structure. I think as far as that goes, that process was much more nebulous for me. I was really just trying to it was more just sequence of events than it was like that at the time. Which is actually, that's one of the things when I go back and look at it. I'm glad you like it, and I appreciate the compliments. And I'm certainly very proud of it, and I'm especially proud of the things that were done on the production end and with the acting, and I think it looks very competent and all these things. But one of my problems with it now is that I do think the writing is kind of stilted, and it's sort of like just people like stuck in situation. There's like a lot of people like sitting around at dinner talking. I think we had to cut like 15 minutes of that. Anyway, that. It was pretty unstructured when I wrote it. I don't think I ever wrote an outline for it. I just, I knew he had to get in the house, and then I knew he had to get out of the house, and I had this sort of idea for the ending from pretty early on.
Yeah, you're sort of kind of getting to an image in your mind or something like
that.
Yeah,
sort of work backwards.
Yeah, that makes sense. That's kind of how I work as well. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to stick around for me to like break this down, or if you want to. I don't know if you have to head out now, or
no. I'd love to stick around. That sounds great.
All right, cool. Let me get the film. I'm gonna have to cover myself a little bit. We're a little bit dank here on Mixed Media with our live editing.
Don't worry.
Let's see. All right, there we go. There's the film. Sort of. Let me restart that. Since you're here, I just want to start on the writing, and it's cool that you're sticking around because I'll get to ask questions about what you were thinking when you did what. Yeah.
Happy to talk about that stuff.
Yeah. So first off, we drop in with no context, which is surprisingly in mainstream is not very common anymore, to just drop into a story. I don't know if you felt that because it was a short, there was no time for exposition or anything like that. But a lot of times you get front loaded with a disgusting amount of exposition, sometimes hidden behind like a hook or something like that. Very overly structured kind of stuff. But here we just kind of drop in. Really the setting is the thing that's getting exposed, and who we're supposed to care about is getting exposed at the beginning. I don't know if you thought about that at all, but.
Yeah, I think the the exposition that comes into play is when he's talking to Stubbs and sort of just learning a little bit about Curtis and Delia. Then I think pretty much a big part of the idea of the movie is like there's even enough that this isn't totally the case because there's enough to suspect Bones of being like a shifty guy, but how without context and just seeing this guy how he is, would I or would someone like me or would you, the viewer, treat this guy if he came to your doorstep with such an affecting story, even if it was just words about someone that you loved and cared about and wanted to know better. I think that's part of it. Probably a character like this would maybe intuit how a figure like Arlo would play into the lives of his children, and he's sort of able to play to that. And I think when you're watching it, you want the menace to be vague rather than like, if right at the beginning you have all this stuff about who Bones is and where he's coming from, then it's not really suspenseful and you don't really feel like he's wrestling with anything when he's in the house.
Yeah, I actually just recently watched Psycho for the first time, believe it or not. And at the beginning of Psycho, you just kind of drop into this conversation, right, between main character and her lover, right? Mm-hmm. And this kind of reminded me of that in the sense that you're kind of dropped into a situation where the dialogue is natural, it's just flowing, and the exposition is not just like the characters essentially talking at the audience. It's more so you're slowly learning what the mental state of each person is, and you don't know anything. You don't know anything about Bones. You don't know anything about the person he's talking to. You don't know if that person he's talking to is going to stick around for the rest of the film. You don't know anything. And so you're coming, you typically, naturally we come into things with sort of, assumptions. So we see a homeless man, we have an assumption. We see him go to a campfire in the woods, looks like a little camping ground. We make an assumption. We've learned that they don't know each other. We make an assumption, right? But all the whole time we're kind of challenging those assumptions in interesting ways, which I think provides tension, essentially. So there's this great tension of what are people's motives? What do people care about? Who should I care about? All that kind of stuff is pretty much unanswered, for a good portion of the film. In fact, the film kind of operates without telling you much at all about what's in everyone's mental states, which I think is what provides the tension, essentially. Yeah, so I really like that.
Thanks, man. Appreciate that.
Yeah. What was I saying? So yeah, I just want to say that this whole thing, I think I've talked about tension on a previous episode, so this whole thing just was like a really great example of how to do that well. So you have like a whole bunch of different layers of things that are happening. It is kind of like Psycho in that sense as well, where there's kind of layers of things happening and you don't know what relates to what or how things will progress or who will eventually. I mean, if you haven't seen Psycho, there's Hitchcock doesn't really care as much about the individual characters as much as he cares about the overall tension. So any characters at service to the overall tension, essentially. Which I'm trying to say that without spoiling anything. So like there's that lack of information, that information starvation. There's like that dramatic irony in a lot of places. So there's like this, we know something, the characters don't know, and that we knowing something provides this extra tension where we don't understand the character's behavior necessarily immediately. They understand themselves, but we know something else happened. So here's a good example I'll give. There's this. So they talk about, like you said, the children of the dead pop star, or was it folk singer? I don't know if I'm getting that wrong.
Yeah, just like the kind of guy that'd be famous.
Yeah, exactly.
In the South in the 70s.
Then we get this cut from the campfire lit to the campfire unlit, and then we get these two characters arriving at the same campfire. So there's a bit of dramatic irony there where we know that the prior characters have been there. These characters don't know what happened the night before. And there's a sort of like almost like oppression of fate kind of feeling of like, okay, what's the fated thing about them arriving at the same place? Yeah,
right.
exactly.
I think that cut might have been Mark. I don't remember if that was in the script or if he just because obviously we're filming those two scenes back to back in the same location. He might have been the one to think about that they're out for like their hike and just happen across that campfire. But yeah, as I watch it now, that definitely has that effect. But I can't remember if that was me or him or somebody else.
Wherever it comes from, I think it's good.
Cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's like that's not the only example. There are many times where we know something, like for example, when we see Bones used for the first time, the characters haven't seen that, and that provides attention for when we hear the noise later, and we're like, okay, what has transpired between seeing him use, him seeing a gun, and then what is going to happen to the characters when they realize that? There's a whole bunch of examples of that sort of dramatic irony. And I'll talk about how the camera work actually helps with that later. So, yeah. Then we have a structure that I thought was pretty nice. It was like, so in terms of peaks, we have like, the first peak sort of happens where we sort of let him in to the house, Bones into the household of the two children of the pop star or singer or whatever. The second sort of peak happens where we have the main character Bones see the gun, and he has that phone call, and there's that noise. That whole thing is sort of like the end of that piece. Then we have the truck arrive, and then we have the last piece is kind of a quick, sort of like release. Not really release, I shouldn't say that. It's the last bit of tension holding out for the rest of the runtime. So I liked that. That was there was nothing in there that was like, okay, this section doesn't need to exist, or this is just happening for the sake of something else. That was a nice progression.
Oh, thanks, man.
I think that's what I had to say about tension. That's what really struck me in terms of what was really well done in the writing was presence of tension. In terms of stuff that maybe kind of pulled me out a little bit, I think there was, it's hard to tell sometimes what's a writing thing, what's an editing thing, what's like what was chosen to shoot on set and whatever. So I have no idea. But I think there's a little bit too much, like the flashing back was a little bit too much.
Oh yeah, you're talking to which specific flashbacks?
Yeah, I'm talking about the to his lover, whoever that is, that he flashes back to. There was a little bit too many times where it kind of took away from the mystique of what was going on.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think that was all definitely written in. I mean, there was even more. I think so there were. I think one of them was cut entirely. Correct me if this is wrong. In the first cut of the movie, which was like very much just like based on the script, I think it was like an extra 10 or even 15 minutes long, and it had like I think more of that, and then also more of flashbacks to his sort of immediate past, like right before the movie. So it takes you back to like before he gets to the train and some of the stuff, burning down the meth lab and stuff like that. Was any of that in the cut that you saw?
No, not at all.
Yeah. So then that was. I think if I were starting this process over, I would have a better sense of like stuff that is overwritten in the script writing stage, because you film these things, then it costs time and it costs money, and then you go back and paring it down to like what makes sense, but what isn't too much is more difficult than if you just do the best you can to figure that stuff out on the page in front of you. I mean, I took the script from something like 50 pages to 25 pages
wow. Yeah.
before we ultimately filmed, but then it was still, it's particularly when so much of it is like things that I've forgotten since I was writing it, but like, oh, I'm like proud of this thematic connection and the way that this plays into this like influence that I like. It's hard not to be indulgent with stuff like that, and I think you definitely have to go back through and make sure you're not being too indulgent of whatever
Yeah.
narrative devices that you enjoy.
Yeah. No, exactly. Yeah. No, yeah. I'm nitpicking, by the way. It's not. None of these are major issues.
I'm not sensitive about stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and so yeah, it was really just more like it's like I would rather. It almost felt as though the more times we got it, the less mysterious it was, essentially, because it's like, okay, the first time we see that, it's like, okay, we hear the voice, we see the flashback, we're like, what is that? And I kind of liked that. What is that in terms of, is that a mental thing? Is that like, like what kind of mental thing is it even? Is it because of the drug use? Is it because of prior psychological problems? Is it because of trauma? What is this? And I kind of liked not seeing as much of it better that way. I would think. Yeah. And then I think I don't know, this might have to do with how much was cut out, but I think the brother and sisters, like what they're there for, kind of gets lost. So like the sister, like she has this, like I said, one of the little climaxes is like, where she lets him in. And I don't know, I felt that was well motivated. I didn't understand her change of mind in that moment, other than, okay, maybe she's just sympathetic. But the way we set up their characters in the woods was very like, oh, like these are interesting, complex people. But I felt like none of that got explored very much, in terms of how things played out. But that might have to do with a runtime thing.
It may be partly a runtime thing. There were certainly more details about Delia's background and Curtis's background in certain versions of the script, but I think the fundamental problem is that the character I was interested with and the character I was relating to when I was writing it was Bones, and then so that was these other two sort of function as foils to like allow whatever psychological conflict is happening in Bones to play out, but I didn't have the tools at the time, nor necessarily do I have them now, to like have like three real people coming from real places to interact. It was sort of one sort of fully realized character on the page. I think Greg and Maura, who played Curtis and Delia respectively, did a fantastic job, and I think Mark did a great job directing them. All that stuff. So this is purely about how I wrote the characters. Is that this sort of one fully realized character who I was working through certain conceptions of self with, whatever, was sort of dynamic and unfolding, and then whatever Delia and Curtis's deal was much more abstract, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. That does make sense. Yeah, I kind of felt that. I kind of felt like there wasn't as much to hold on to with those characters, so that makes sense that you were sort of focusing on Bones, who definitely was a well fleshed out, I watched it, a few times. So when I went back and watched it again, very clearly, that's good directing. I can tell now that I know what's going on with him more, not necessarily that you know really everything about the character, of course, by the end of the movie, I could dissect his reactions and actions a lot better because now I knew what had happened. And so there was a lot more diving into the character. It's kind of like what I like with character dramas in general. Is like, you watch it for the first time, you get a frick ton of tension, and trying to understand people, right? And when you watch it again, there's this whole other film that kind of opens up as to, oh, I can understand what was going through the character's mind here a little bit better now that I know what happened. And that's kind of what happened to me with this one, where he's sitting around the campfire. Even his little micro expressions on his face are very congruent with what he should be thinking, which is some good directing.
And Ian Boyd is a very talented actor. He's you can actually see him. He's in Mank. He's in a scene in Mank. So go check that out. Follow him on Instagram. Maura Mantle and Greg McKillop are the two other main actors. I'm sorry, I forgot the gentleman who played Stubbs. But yeah, first of all, thank I think Ian does a tremendous job.
Yeah, I don't know if you know. Well, I'm going to talk about cinematography now because I'm kind of a cinematography nerd. But I don't know if you know, but is your cinematographer was your cinematographer or director like influenced by David Fincher at all, or
Oh, I bet Mark is a big Fincher guy. Mike DeGioia was the DP. And I don't know if he was influenced by Fincher in the way they were framing stuff. I would imagine so. It's whoever was coming out of film school in 2016 was probably watching a lot of Zodiac and shit like that.
yeah. Here, let me see if I can find like there's like some segments in here where like this dinner scene, the way it's shot is very sort of Fincher. Pretty much all the camera moves are very Fincher. Let me probably hard to find like a good example off the spot, but watch the film. That is the reason to watch the film. But yeah, so you have like, so what makes it that way is basically you have like these very like you have these translational movements that are happening with rotational movements at the same time. So you have like the camera tracking left, right, and you have like this rotation that's happening at the same time. You have like these framed compositions. So like if you think of I don't know, maybe there's some extreme cases. I can't think of off the top of my head, but sometimes Fincher likes to do these like very framed shots where like there's the frame within the frame. So like you have like, in some of these shots you have like the banister that's framing out the shot, or you have the tree that's like aiding in the composition, closing out the left side of the frame or something like that. You have that as well. So you have that also while you're moving. So use that to create depth as well, which I thought was pretty cool. And there's a lot of digital zooms and translations as well, which like I don't know any director that does it as much as David Fincher, with like these like sort of like in the editor zooming in, which looks very different from a push or even an optical zoom on a camera, right? Like a push gives you that parallax, right? You have like objects coming in and out in the way that you would sort of expect, and zooms sort of compress the background and all that kind of stuff while you're zooming it optically. This is purely digital, which means that the image is essentially like becoming bigger, right, on the screen to sort of zoom it, which gives it this very like otherworldly, almost like Fincher actually talks about this. His idea for that kind of cinematography is that the world is the stage in his movies, and they're not supposed to be real. It's not supposed to feel real. It's supposed to feel, it's supposed to feel like a movie. And so that's sort of his philosophy behind that. So I thought that was pretty cool, and it works so well with the story. I think the camera work adds probably as much tension as the story itself has in it. And the reason I say that is because the camera is kind of like, it knows where to go before the viewer knows what's happening, right? So there are certain shots where the camera's panning, completely unmotivated. For people who don't know, motivation is basically the reason why the camera might move. That's sort of the theory behind motivation. So and the other end of the spectrum would be like Spielberg. Every camera move is motivated. So every camera move has something that's moving the camera in a certain direction. Sometimes he'll even add stuff in post. It's kind of odd where he'll add like a rat running across the screen so that he can motivate the camera movement left or right or something like that because he didn't like it. And this is all unmotivated moves practically. So very detached from your, like, it feels like you're roving around in the world as like this sort of disembodied thing rather than being asked to absorb yourself in the world. It's a very different experience. And it works. Go ahead. Were you going to say something?
Oh, yeah. Well, sorry. I was just going to say, so a lot of this I can't speak to, especially articulately. A lot of that is just Mark and also Haven, who is our AD and is as big a cinephile as anybody I know, and Mike DeGioia, very talented. I do know that some of the voyeurism, I think particularly in the parts before Bones gets into the house, when some of the stuff between Delia and Curtis inside the house is unfolding, is sort of, first you're suggesting that Bones is watching the house, and then later once Bones is in the house, you're suggesting that his pursuers are watching the house, and I think some of that came from. I'm a big fan of, and a big inspiration for the movie was Night of the Hunter, the Robert Mitchum movie directed by Sidney Lawton, and there's scenes. It's sort of at its core a pretty similar plot, and before Robert Mitchum's character shows up in the movie, he's outside the house, like observing the characters inside and learning the types of things about them that would allow him to infiltrate their lives. So I only say that to speak to the thing about the sort of voyeuristic or floating observational camera movements, because a lot of the rest of what you're talking about, you would have to talk to Mark or Mike DeJoy about that, or Haven.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. Like the camera work added to the tension, which I thought was really stellar stuff. A lot of times there's, what I really dislike is when camera work is essentially just expositional, right? Like it's just there to expose the action. That's pretty much it. There's not really a movie at all that I think you have to do it that way. It's pretty much just a lacking of personality. And this one did not have that problem at all.
So who's a big director who you think does that other thing, just the expositional camera work?
Oh, you know what? Nolan does that a lot. It actually bugs me sometimes.
Because he's just kind of like showcase. He's just trying to showcase like how cool the practical effects he set up are. So he just sort of has like big sweeping camera movements and stuff like that. Yeah,
sometimes it just lacks lacks cinematic, character. It's just. Obviously, I actually like Nolan. So that's not a knock on him or anything like that. It's just the shots are there because this is what gives us the most efficient way to communicate to the audience something, right?
I was just hearing De Palma talk about that actually on a podcast. It was like excerpts from that documentary about it, but he was talking about I just watched Blowout for the first time, and he was talking about how it's like he hates the idea of coverage and the idea that you always have to get things from like certain angles that you like figure out later. He's like, you want to know like what you're looking at and why and stuff like that. Yeah, cool. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah. And then in terms of the color grade, very flat, almost kind of loggy out of the camera sort of thing. There were some scenes where it was there was like a monochromatic color scheme chosen, which I thought was pretty cool. Like this is pretty monochromatic. Out here is pretty monochromatic. Which I thought was cool. I think sometimes, though, especially outdoors in the woods, this kind of looks a little muddy and a little without personality as well. So, it's not because of the lack of separation, because that doesn't bug me, because the muddiness can be part of the look. It's more like I felt like there wasn't as clear of a direction with why it looks like that. Or in stuff like that, yeah.
I would imagine that at least part of that would be, and by the way, just to everyone watching, to you guys, everything I'm saying is limited by my sort of, I didn't pick the shots, I didn't even really like storyboard and stuff like that. I was on to help facilitate what they had in mind, but I don't necessarily have an eye for stuff like this. I think some of this stuff I would imagine that we were kind of limited by natural daylight to a certain extent, and there were only a couple scenes that we really were able to like light up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. And then in terms of the editing, I thought the editing was very competent. There's a lot of restraint sometimes. Like this dinner scene here, there's a lot of restraint from the editor, which I really enjoyed. The editor refrained from like just taking this very planned long take and just letting it run. And instead, the editor decided to, actually like really think about which shots to pick out, when ending the long shot for short bits of time is really important to punctuate things or to show off certain things. I really enjoyed that. So you had like this really nice play, not just with the camera moving in and out or recomposing the scene or anything like that. You also had the editor choosing to cut to a medium close-up or something like that, which I think it's also your director too, because sometimes you spend so much time planning something, and clearly this shots like that, I look at them like that's a lot of planning, I assume, at least. A lot of effort. Yeah, a lot of effort to get those long takes right. And so, when you're in the editor, you as a director, you might be like, all right, we spent so much time on that long take, we're just going to let the long take run, or it might feel disappointing. But everything was in service of the film, which is good, So I think if you had let it run, I think it would have been not as good. So that was a good decision. And there were many things like that, too, where I could tell that this was a continuous take, but there's some editing choices being made in here for the betterment of the story, not just for, just to put down the best stuff you have, that sort of mentality. I think that's like mostly it, pretty much. The only other thing I'll have to say, I notated in my original notes. I ended up reorganizing them. Is I think I don't know what you might have been focusing more on what Bones was thinking sort of towards the end and everything like that, but I think for the sister's actions at the end, and I don't know what comes from where, I think that sometimes her actions don't really jive with what I think of as life-threatening situations sort of things. And then it kind of took me out a little bit. I've actually been unfortunate enough to be held up by gunpoint once in my life. Ben knows the story a little bit. Oh yeah, you both know the story. In Baltimore. It was a good time. And it didn't really drive well with what I would think of as I was with two other people as well, and so we kind of debriefed afterwards. And there's a great YouTube channel actually called The Behavior Panel. I don't know if you've heard of them. They do body language stuff. One thing they talk about a lot, because there are a lot of times talking about lying and things like that. These are these aren't crackpots. These are the one guy's former CIA. One guy's former Army interrogator. Another guy works for people in the G8. He won't say who, but so pretty legit people. You can look up their channel. They talk about fear a lot because a lot of times lying has to do with fear, right? So there's a lot of fear responses, and it's very physiological. And I think there's not enough involuntariness about the way she behaves or chooses her actions towards the end there. So if I'm kneeling down with a gun pointed at me, I think I would be involuntarily both exit checking, looking for where the exits are, looking at the gun more than I look at his face, ingesting not so much what he's saying because I want to understand him, but more because I want to know how to get out of the situation. I want to say the right words, if that makes sense, that will get me out of the situation, instead of I want to connect with him, if that makes sense. And maybe if there's some I'm thinking of an anime. I can't think of it right now, but sometimes if you set up the character well, you can get there anyway, because the character that's that character's way of behaving. But I think we don't get enough of the characters for me to say that big of a departure from what I think would be human behavior to just be in a complete stress response would be completely different, if that makes sense.
I think part of that has to do with the I'm just having pop-ups on my screen. You guys can still hear me, right?
Yeah, I can still hear you.
Great. I think part of that has to do with for my at that point in the development of the story, fascination with the character of Bones, and it's not enough taking myself out of Delia's head, because I'm in my brain as the writer, I'm oh, what a fascinating psychological change this character has undergone over the course. He seemed like he was really trying to be a good guy, and now he's struggling with that. And then I'm almost putting that into Delia, who, you're right, probably wouldn't be feeling any of those things, and actually her affection or tolerance for Bones is probably pretty limited and based much more on his being a novelty than feeling some deep spiritual connection to this stranger. I think as far as Kill Your Darlings, I really wanted Bones to talk about the sort of interaction he had with a girl from his past, and the sort of the relationship, the crumbling of that sort of human presence had and the sort of the degradation of his humanity or whatever, and wanting to arrive at that destination and having Delia's character behave in such a way that elicited that from Bones rather than having Delia react in a natural way to the situation and, getting to whatever psychological revelations I wanted to get to about Bones through the action of the story rather than just through monologuing. But I think also a lot of that has to do with just particularly at that point, so much emphasis and so much obsession with dialogue. I think dialogue was everything, and interesting dialogue is how you get to everything. I would definitely want to. I think in general, I'd want that. If I were to rewrite that scene, I would definitely want it to be way less talky. Because presumably, even take like Bones at that point, he thinks people are on their way to kill him right then. So it's like he's not gonna. Oh fucking! When I was younger, there was a girl I liked. That doesn't even and I like the effect that the scene has, and I really like the last 5 minutes or so of the movie are what I would go back and enjoy rewatching the most probably. But it doesn't necessarily make sense in like a literal way, and I think the way Delia is responding to being held up by the gun is probably within the context of that sort of larger structural whatever.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah. I just remembered one last thing. We've been going on a long time. Sorry, you other two. But last thing I'll say is I don't know if that was intentional or not, but there's this the truck coming in, there's this other plot line with these people who are coming after Bones, the main character, while he's also trying to swindle these two siblings. And we sort of introduced that truck early on. I think that might have been a little bit better if we got like an insert of inside the car, so because I think the first time I watched it I didn't immediately understand that was a completely separate thing happening. I was kind of like, did I get pushed back somewhere or something like that? I feel like an insert inside the car of like some distinct thing that shows that it's like a different thing going on would have helped a little bit.
What would have been good is like a key or like something hanging off like a rear view mirror or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
But besides that though, when they get out of the car, it's such a Breaking Bad moment with their
feet.
Their feet coming out. It reminds me exactly of the twins in Breaking Bad, and I don't know if that was an intentional callback. It looked like a literal homage almost.
That was definitely. I don't know if it was a literal homage, but that the Breaking Bad finale came out. What would have been the fall semester of my sophomore year of college, which is when I would have started writing the movie or the play version. We all watched a ton of True Detective. It was definitely the area. This is sort of gritty hour-long crime dramas. It was very much, and still is, the visual. It's in the ether of like what people are processing visually. So I think, probably at least consciously or unconsciously, Breaking Bad was definitely influencing that for sure. Because that was my feed as well. It was me and Haven.
Oh, that's really cool. Got your little cameo.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, so that's pretty much all I got. I mean, I just recommend you guys check it out. This is the first time doing an interview, so if you like us bringing people on to like literally talk to them as we like go through things, just let us know and we'll keep doing it. If you got to go, you can go now. If you have any plugs or anything, social media, whatever you want to plug, you can go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. I would check out if you guys are interested in the movie and in the projects that I've worked on with some of these guys, and then that some of these guys have also worked on with other people. Check out the website for the Zephyr Entertainment Network. You can find a lot more stuff directed by Mark Rosenzweig, who directed this movie. Sorry, I'm gonna make sure I plug everyone's things. And Mark is also involved in the Trifecta sketches on YouTube. So he acts and directs a lot of sketches through them. I also have a podcast that I run here in New York with my friend Matt Summerstein called White Boys Heart Movies. We just talked about Old on last week's episode. And then my social media, you can find me at Jason David Comedy on Instagram and at Jason D Comedy on Twitter. And I think also Ian Boyd is on Instagram. He's the guy who played Bones. At Maura Mantle has a lot of very popular comedy videos. You can find her on Instagram. And Greg McKillop is the guy who played Curtis. I believe he has stuff on Insta as well. You can follow what they've been up to since the movie came out.
Cool. Yeah. Very generous with your shout outs, shouting out your whole team. That's awesome.
Sorry if I forgot anybody, and I'm sorry I've taken up a lot of your guys' time. I really appreciate you having me on the pod. This has been a lot of fun. I haven't talked about the movie in detail in quite some time, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah. And maybe we'll hook up later. I don't know. You're in the Discord now, so you know where to find us.
I'm on the Discord. You have my phone number. Yeah, I'd love to connect at some other point. Thanks so much for having me.
All right. Yep.
All right,
I'll see you.
Thank you, guys. Talk to you later.
Take care. All right. So let me switch over slides. Sorry, guys, that went so long, but first time interviewing and also whatever, but I thought that was really fun. I don't know what you guys thought.
Yeah, it's interesting. I couldn't really contribute because I didn't watch it yet. So I know you're talking about a lot. And also,
Yeah.
not being from a movie background, I'm like, what do these things mean?
Oh no, editing problem. Oh no. Hold on. We'll be back after this 5-minute break. No, just kidding. Let me see. Is your guy here, Ben, at all?
He or she said that they were watching earlier, so if you are still on, say something. You can make a comment in the live chat. Let us know if you're still here.
Yeah, and producer wife right now is laughing at our misery with this this live editing. It's funny watching the little Reddit guy run around the screen, I guess. All right, Ben, you want to reintroduce the podcast as if we've never been here, because that's what we do, because you're looking at a behind-the-scenes look at our show.
Sure. All right. Well, welcome to Mixed Media. We are a live podcast. It's live streamed starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Friday night. And basically, the three of us talk about our respective art fields and, generally art in society in the current world. And today, if you watched the earlier segment or you're watching live, we are doing something which we did 2 weeks ago, which is pretty popular, and I know we had a lot of fun with it, where we basically found some art that we enjoyed on Reddit or other spaces on the internet and are kind of offering our thoughts on it and kind of reviewing it. So, yeah, that's who we are. So the piece I want to look at is a piece I found on Reddit called "Fantasy for Orchestra." This person had a couple of pieces they put up recently, but I chose this one. So it's an interesting 12-minute long piece. Irvin, you want to play a little bit of it?
Sure. Let me find it. Fantasy for Orchestra. There we are. There we go. And
I don't know. Sorry, I don't know if I missed this, but I don't know if you acknowledge that the person is here.
oh yeah, Scott is here.
Oh, really? It's not showing up on my live in my. Oh, okay. Wow. I don't know why the comments weren't loading there for me. I had to close it and refresh it. Oh, well, hello, Scott. So yeah, we're gonna start with just playing a little bit of your piece. Not gonna go through all 12 minutes, but just to give our audience a sense of this piece.
Do you want me to start anywhere, or?
I think probably just start at the beginning, unless you have somewhere else you'd like us to start, Scott.
Yeah, I'm gonna start from the beginning from now. By the way, Scott, we have a Discord in the link in the description. You should hop on there because we have a growing art community. So yeah, let me start.
you can probably stop there.
Cool. Awesome. I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was great.
Yeah. Okay.
Out
So,
of curiosity, sorry, before you start, I
yeah.
was wondering, Scott, if you could tell us if who your inspirations are, music-wise, like composers and whatnot. You can continue while waiting for the response, I guess, because maybe a
Yeah,
bit
there's
delayed.
that delay, that nasty delay.
Yeah. It happens not having the person on live, but it's okay. So yeah, what I noticed, first thing that kind of stood out to me about this piece, um, your most of your stuff I think is on our classical music, and last time I was looking at music from mostly from our composer. So there's maybe a little bit of different crowd, the kind of composers who are posting on those two channels. So there was certainly some similarities. All right, so John Williams, romantic composers. Yeah, that makes sense to me. I'll say that, relative to like most of the stuff that I found, and I again listened to a lot of different things for, to find
Oh, wait. Our
review.
stream died? At least for me. I don't know if that was just for me.
What?
It's bad.
No, my
Like-
stream did not die.
It looks like it's going on for me.
Okay, sorry. I don't know, both on Twitch and YouTube. I actually can't. Maybe not my end, but on YouTube it's just dead. On Twitch it's
Oh,
fine.
really? Looks like the YouTube is still going. I have it kind of corner of my eye on my phone.
Okay.
So I'll just keep going. Okay. So, your piece, well, all the pieces of yours that you posted, not just this one, kind of stood out to me because, a lot of the stuff that I see and hear on these various Reddit channels, the composers tend to generally not have such a great sense of, I talked about last time, kind of dividing orchestration into orchestration and instrumentation. And you can't have, if you haven't watched, if anyone who didn't watch the last show, I consider instrumentation like the writing, kind of a horizontal aspect, writing for one instrument. Is it this line from here to here playable and characteristic, idiomatic for the instrument? And then orchestration is kind of the vertical aspect, like how do I line up colors and balances within like one, given note, or a whole orchestra. And I find that a lot of music that I see and hear on these various Reddit channels that I explored, a lot of instrumentation problems. And if you don't have instrumentation, you definitely can't have good orchestration. And your piece definitely is not like that. We have not only good instrumentation, but really great orchestration overall. So, I'm kind of a really big fan of two things in music, and obviously melody. I think everybody would say that, but I'm a really huge fan of color, orchestral color. And if anyone who's been watching our show from the past probably almost half a year now, I don't remember exactly when we started, but I talk a lot about orchestral color. And in case that term itself is not clear to someone who's not a musician, just listen to this piece that what we're just listening to. That is a great example of orchestral color. There's some other things too. You could kind of say that it's an exploration of kind of chordal color too, more than like a chord progression, especially towards the end. I think it's less of like functional harmony, more of just non-functional harmony that's there for its sound. But just the way you're combining the instruments, you have such a great understanding of trying to produce a particular kind of sound color and varying it, and how to achieve that, which is really fantastic to see in it's something I did not find in a lot of these pieces that I was listening to, and you really have such a great, well-developed sense of that. I'm going to assume, you can correct me if I'm wrong in the chat, I'm going to assume that you have some training in orchestration and just composition in general, because, it's really, you can obviously self-study your way into that as well, but that's kind of hard to do. I would say if you're just kind of doing it all by yourself, and you're not gonna luck into those orchestral colors. So yeah, you have, like I said, you have this great sense of how to create these different colors, and you're doing it at the same time as giving us something melodic, because it's easy to be really atmospheric and colorful and not have something melodic to kind of lash onto. And you give us both of those things, which is kind of a mark of even going beyond just the being a skilled orchestrator. That's really what I listen for in all the greatest music, both melody and great colors along with that melody. Yeah, and there's some really great stuff. Okay, so you studied some private orchestration studies. Yeah, that's great. Definitely is paid off in your music, I would say. So a couple of things. I don't know whether you're going for like a space-ish feel with this. The visuals on the video kind of suggest that, but the music itself also suggests that. So I don't know whether that's intentional or not. To me, it sounds sort of like we're in this kind of, outer space exploration-ish kind of world. It reminds me a little bit of his piece that I played. I don't think it was the actual world premiere. It was the maybe like the second performance of it, called Cosmic Dust, which was, music to accompany like a bunch of images from the Hubble Space Telescope. It definitely had some element of that, and I think you're aided in that by just your color choices, and then your overall texture is kind of empty. It does get fuller, but a lot of it's kind of fewer instruments, and you kind of feel that like aural gap, and then just generally kind of the restrained use of the strings, I would say, and the percussion. So okay, so not necessarily about space, but
Yeah,
I think
quite.
it certainly matches that visual that you put up there, whether that's intentional or not. It sort of sounds in that world. And there are a lot of, like, you mentioned Williams being an influence. Like, there's a lot of that sort of empty music in places like Hoth, or just in general, lots of like starscapes of his. And I've talked to about how Williams is also getting some of those emptier landscapes from people like Vaughan Williams and Vaughan Williams' Seventh Symphony. So kind of fits in that. There are other moments that really remind me of, maybe I've just been listening to too much Sir Arnold Bax recently, but there's some moments in there that kind of remind me of his melodic choices, I'd say, in something like Tintagel, which is, if you listen, I highly recommend you everyone out there look up Sir Arnold Bax, really underrated British composer, and his piece Tintagel is fantastic. All of his, pretty much most of his stuff is really great, but Tintagel in particular is probably his masterpiece. And if you listen to it, you'll probably think that you're like, I'm crazy, because like this is very much the opposite of Tintagel in terms of texture and color. But I think there's certain ways that he like handles melodic stuff that reminds me of what you're doing, or you remind me of what he was doing. Yeah. So I don't know. There's certainly, I think, a sense of danger in there too throughout. And just, I don't know, overall, like, to me, you know, I don't. You were kind of getting out of like literal, discussion of music, but just my overall impression is kind of a sense of like being lost a little bit and kind of some sense of kind of exploration and danger, but certainly resolving itself at the end. So I know you mentioned that this is written during lockdown. You kind of represent the virus itself. So kind of makes sense, being adrift in the middle of 2020. Yeah. So some comments I'd make. One thing I think that could make this piece improve a little bit is kind of the overall arc of it. And so you're doing a really great job, which another thing that I talked about in the last Reddit review session episode, where sometimes it's hard to, like, when you have a thematic idea, how do you like develop it, and how do you kind of have it keep returning and not just have like a through composed piece. You're doing a really good job of taking your main idea, and it's great because it's so simple and so recognizable, and kind of developing it and bringing it back, and so it has an arc. But I think overall, it's sort of, the first 4 minutes are great. There's definitely an arc. We're kind of building, and there's some really, really great stuff. Kind of grow at like around 320, I'd say. And the stuff at about 425-ish, roughly the time on the YouTube video. That's really cool. We kind of get this like, spiky, not really jazzy, but like kind of sort of like jazz-like feel with the woodwinds and percussion. That's really cool. But I feel like after that section ends, the piece is a little bit flat in terms of its trajectory. So we've done like a great job kind of building up to something, and we've maintained a lot of interest. And thereafter, like, I feel like even though we get kind of louder and softer at points, I feel like some of the tension in that middle section, as we're kind of heading toward the end, I found my attention kind of sagging a little bit. I just, so you might want to think a little bit about how to, in a longer piece like this, how to kind of maintain momentum. And it doesn't just have to be like, we're going to keep getting more and more, exciting, build up to higher and higher climax. That's kind of like the Marvel, superhero mold of like filmmaking. If we've talked a lot about like that kind of narrative structure. We'd have to keep making the stakes higher. You don't need to do that. But I felt like, some of it in that middle just was kind of felt a little bit flat. I think some of that too is because of handling of dynamics, which I don't think is necessarily like an intentional thing. But I feel like it's not what didn't sound, the dynamics, especially there, weren't quite as natural, where we kind of have like, fuller texture, and that in real life it would be really loud, and then we go from like, big brass stabs, and then like one woodwind, an oboe or something, and it's kind of equally as loud. And even if you want that, if this were being performed live, even if you want the oboe player to play that note really loudly, it's going to come down in volume. And some of that also might be with like YouTube compression too. But in the music that we have, the sound that we have, it's pretty much the same volume as the brass. And there's a lot of moments like that where I think if you try to in your mock-up to have a little bit more like realistic, not realistic, naturalistic kind of volume, that would help create more of that arc and a little bit more interest. I think also some of that interest could come from maybe a little bit more like overt development of the melody. I think you certainly are developing it, but it seems like the melody is more just in that section, kind of just sprinkled throughout, instead of kind of receiving some sort of development, or maybe maybe introduce some other kind of dominant theme, secondary theme. I don't mean dominant like in terms of pitch, but like secondary idea that kind of is introduced there. So those are just some things that might help the overall arc of the piece, the narrative arc of the piece. And then one thing also that I noticed is that sometimes you have these textures, especially with mostly where we have strings and a woodwind playing, and the woodwind is kind of as loud as the strings, and you can get that in real life, but obviously it's much easier to get that with virtual instruments than it is in real life, because if you really want that kind of balance, you're gonna have to have the strings play much softer and the woodwind play really loudly. Otherwise, woodwind is kind of going to blend in and sort of be more of like a like adding color, but not be quite as powerful as the strings. So it's much harder to achieve that in real life. And if you want that effect for like the woodwind on top of the strings to be as loud, just know that you're gonna have to really have them marked up really high if they're dynamic, and the strings marked down a lot. Computer will mask that, obviously, because you can tell the computer do anything you want. Yeah, so overall, some really great stuff. I just love that you're doing so much with the woodwinds and the percussion, and like not overriding with the strings. That's another thing that's kind of, I'd say, fairly uncommon amongst pieces of it. I've seen on Reddit. Really good handling of percussion, all those percussion colors. That includes the piano and harp, and then tying that in with the woodwinds. It's kind of not a terribly common color choice, and it works really well. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. Yeah, so I'd say again, keep playing with those colors. I did, like I said, I listened to the other pieces you put on Reddit, and again, you have that really great sense of orchestral color. So that but keep playing with those and keep developing that. And then, yeah, just think about ways that you can kind of increase momentum in a longer piece. And this is a relatively longer piece. It's good, but it's kept to a manageable size. It's not like you see a lot of people on there like, I wrote a symphony and I've never written anything before, but here's 40 minutes of music, and you're like, no, that's you're not going to maintain anything for 40 minutes if you've never written anything before. So this is like a manageable size, but it still needs a little bit more. A piece of this length needs a little bit, I think, a little bit more care. I shouldn't say that. A piece of this length tends to need something that's going to propel the narrative instead of just like one short idea. And you're definitely like on your way to do that. Just think about ways that you can, the middle doesn't sag quite as much. Yeah. So and then, like I said, some of those things about dynamics and like dynamic contrast, naturalistic dynamic contrast, which I think will also help with that narrative arc in the middle. Yeah.
Any man who likes John Williams is a man that Ben can sympathize with, I think.
Absolutely. He's the master of, orchestral writings over the past 50 years. I don't think anybody in any kind of, not just the film world, but I don't think any classical composers match up to him in the past 50 years.
Yeah, strong statements.
Yeah, let's say bold statement.
And that's it. There are a lot of fantastic composers right now, but he does. Yes, Conrad Pope is great. If you, I don't know if you are on Facebook, but Conrad Pope's orchestration page on Facebook is another great orchestration resource. It's not quite as active as something like Orchestration Online, but if you want to hear some stuff from observations from Conrad Pope himself, that's something to check out if you haven't already. Conrad Pope is, for anyone who doesn't know, one of Williams' probably his main orchestrator over probably from like the 90s to today. He had some other people like Herb Alpert in the earlier part of his career who were also fantastic orchestrators who are really responsible for helping bring about the sound of Star Wars. Although they all say that they don't do nearly as much work as orchestrators for orchestrating for other composers because Williams tends to write so much. Kind of writes out what instruments he wants playing what, and their job is mostly to like balance it and figure out like dovetailing and stuff. But obviously, I think they have more influence and impact than they give themselves credit for. Oh, William Ross too, yeah.
Yeah. Are orchestrators at all like very well? I feel like they're not very well appreciated. Like, I mean, I'm not in this world, so I wouldn't know how much appreciation they do get or not. But yeah,
very little outside of the actual community that actually brings you scores to life. Within that little community, the orchestrators are very important. Shirley Walker, yep. Do you like tend to study a lot of film orchestration because you've got a lot of good names, and these are some big names here that are not necessarily familiar to the average listener. Okay, yeah. So definitely keep looking at film orchestration, and again, that's also why we need I've made this rant several times, but why we need more film scores being published, because that's also the best way to like look at these details. Obviously, you can listen for them, but if you want to see, exact orchestration choices that aren't like apparent to your ear, that's why we need these more film scores to be published, especially John Williams, which I know Hal Leonard will never let happen. Disney will never let happen, but hopefully one day we get to see some real John Williams scores, not just the signature editions.
Cool.
All right.
Yeah, Scott, if you want to join us in the Discord, I don't know if you're there already, but we'd love to have you there. The link is in the description. Nathan will Nathan's about to speak. I will drop you a link in the chat to our Discord. We have like a community of people, a lot of musicians actually in the Discord. We just got a music submission. Yeah. So if
it's Ben's style, but we'll see.
Yeah, so if you have any future stuff you want to shoot us a direct message on, or shoot Ben a direct message on, whatever, join our Discord in the description.
Yeah, thanks for letting me look at and talk about your piece. Really great stuff. Keep up the good work.
All right, Nathan, as if we haven't started again.
All right, 1 second. All right, so welcome back to Mixed Media Podcast. Or do you say welcome back normally when you're transitioning? Because like if you're watching the video, you didn't come back from anything,
Yeah, no, I still do it.
Okay, welcome back to the Mixed Media Podcast. This is the gaming section. We went through the music side of things, and films. And yeah, so I'll be talking about a game called Derpy Conga. I found it on Reddit. And yeah, so if you can you play the trailer, Irving, of the game?
Yes, I can. Give me 1 second.
So I guess I'll talk about the people behind it. So it's created by a company called Giant Door. As far as I know, this is their first game. I'm pretty sure it is. Started in 2019, so I assume they've been working on the game throughout, more or less. Plus like other things like website work and whatever. It's only 4 people. There's a programmer, a game designer, and 2 artists. One of them's an environment artist. One of them's a character artist, which is super cool. That like, it's sort of hard to assemble a small team like that. It's usually like either you're alone or you're like relatively large. The middle ground is not very common. So yeah, let's watch this trailer. Right, I think that's the end, pretty much.
Looks interesting.
Yeah. All right. So
I'll be honest. I'm not sure from watching that I understood what exactly the game is about.
yeah, I understand. Well, the trailer isn't the greatest.
Yeah, the trailer could use a little work. Yeah, you can always send me an email at irving@ariella.co.
Yeah. I've actually been doing a lot of research into like video game advertising, stuff like that, and yeah, like one of the worst things that indie game devs do is like making trailers, and they're always like, it's gonna be hard to sell a game like this because the first thing you want people to know is like what's interesting about your game. It's like if you can't even tell what's happening, what the mechanic is, then that's already an L. But let me explain. So you play as a little creature thing. I don't know what you call them. And there are also these other creature things that are around the map and whatnot. So if you go next to them, you'll extend your hand and you can join together, as you can see in the little image right there. And you can create long chains of creature things. All right. It just dawned on me. That's why it's called Derpy Conga, like a conga line. Wow. Okay. Well, yeah, that's what that is. And when you form a conga line, you have 2 states. So you have the line form, you also have a circle form, which you may have noticed in the trailer, where you can essentially form a little like cylinder-y thing, which can help you do certain tasks. So it's pretty much just a puzzly platformer sort of game, and the ability to go make a line is useful in certain circumstances. The ability to make a circle is useful in certain circumstances. So, for example, if you are able to form a line, right, and you imagine that someone were to sort of jump from one side of some thing to another side over some gap, right? if you're able to get like at least one person's foot on the other side, you essentially can bring over the entire group of people without having to deal with doing it with every single individual person. You have certain things where like you need to press a button or two buttons at the same time. And the only way to do that is to form a long enough conga line that can reach both the buttons at the same time. Stuff like that. The circle is useful for interacting with certain objects. So there's like this thing that launches like fruits, question mark, I don't know, launches things out of trees, and you need to form a circle. I'm not going to get into it, but you need to form a circle in order to do that. And there's also like a catapult sort of thing. In order to get into it, you need to form a circle, right? And going through narrow gaps requires you to be a circle, because the way the line is set, it's always perpendicular to your camera. So if you're walking straight, you can have a really wide line unless you turn your camera 90 degrees. So yeah, the game I played was a demo. Wow, it was just a demo. It's free on Steam currently in a demo form, and I'd say it sort of looks promising. So it's certainly well stylized. I think the artist did a pretty good job of keeping the whole thing pretty consistent. I did notice a slight disconnect between the environment and the player and the characters. I don't know if I'm imagining this, but to me, it seemed like the characters, if you look at them up close, you may have not noticed from the trailer, that they're a little low poly relative to the environment around them. I don't think it's like a stylistic choice of like low poly. It's like this weird middle ground where everything's not entirely well rounded, but it's not like the low poly art style you're used to seeing in indie games. So I don't know what's up with that. I wonder if it has to do with just like different like means to create art that they went through, whatever. But yeah, that only really shows when you get close to the characters, which is not very often. I say the color choice is very good. The paths are like entirely like they're very contrasty from the rest of the world. Everything else is pretty dull. The rocks are just gray, right? Everything else where you need to go, the items that are important, they're all like nice and colorful, and your character is spelled well. Like having the only blue thing on the screen being your character is pretty useful. Or like the other characters that you need to find and stuff like that. The end goal is to go into the little like UFO spaceship that was pictured in the trailer. And although I noticed that's very, very dull, which surprised me considering everything else of interest is not dull, I think it works out anyways because it's sort of just like the only large like man-made object, right? It's going to draw your attention anyways, even if it's not colorful and stuff like that. As the music side of things, it's just fine. It's nothing crazy. It fits the vibe of the whole thing. It's like tropical and it's like derpy, but it's not like anything I jam out to. But it's also not like garbage. It's just like it does the job. Does the job all right. Nothing.
Is
really
it the
more to say
music
about
from the
that.
trailer? Is that the music that's in the game?
I didn't have my audio on. Well, because I can't hear through the thing. But I didn't bother turning on my computer, so I'm not sure. But yeah, I don't know. I assume it's like similar at least, right? If it's not the same. Yeah. So some problems were that there were essentially no settings. You're pretty much locked into some, like graphics quality and whatever. You can change the volume, whatever. I think there was like a bloom setting. I think there were two other things. I can't remember what they were, but nothing comprehensive. I don't think there were even control settings. You were stuck with that. There's also this problem that I also had with the other game I reviewed. What's it called? The First Tree? Yeah, I think that's what it's called. Where I have an Xbox controller plugged into my computer at pretty much all times, and so the game thinks, oh, you must be wanting to use your Xbox controller. I don't for this game. I want to use my mouse and keyboard, and what happens is it shows you all the instructions using Xbox controller buttons, right? So it's like, oh, press A to do this, right? I'm like, okay, what's the keyboard button to do this? And there's no button mapping in the settings, so you can't even check yourself. The only way would be to like unplug my controller, which I didn't feel like doing, so I just ended up plugging my controller. I actually I was trying to stick through the whole keyboard thing, but it became a problem where I had my controller in my drawer plugged into my computer, and it activated the rumble motors on my controller, and it just sounded like my desk was dying from being like battered by the controller rumbling. So I had to take it out and just use it. This has been a very common thing, by the way. It's very surprising that this happened to me 2 games in a row that I've reviewed. It's pretty normal for the games to detect what you're using, right? So maybe it'll say, oh, you have an Xbox controller plugged in, right? You must want to use that. But the moment you press a keyboard key, normally it'll just switch. It'll just know, like, oh, you want to use the keyboard now, and you can just switch back and forth as you want to. But not in this case. Let's see what else. Sort of scene composition thing was there was this is a rock, right? There are multiple rocks that you need to destroy with the fruit things that you shoot at them, right? Like the first time you see one of them, or I think it think it's the first time. It's incredibly the rock just blends in with the rest of the background. It's like that same gray color because it's a rock, yes, but like there's nothing that makes it very special. It's on a little pedestal, but like I didn't realize that that's what it was at first. It's not very clear that that's what that's supposed to be. So I think there could be some work there to prevent me from just running around being like, well, what am I supposed to do? I'm not supposed to shoot this dull rock thing. So I think it's a very good foundation for a demo. Yeah, it was incredibly easy. It didn't really, I called it a puzzle game, but it really didn't show off many puzzles. Really, it's like, they're very mild puzzles. It's more like where am I supposed to go, rather than like I understand where I'm supposed to go, but how am I supposed to get there? That's a lot more interesting of a problem, right? It's I think how well the game is going to do in the end is going to heavily depend on the competence of whoever is designing the levels. On their website, they don't have a level designer listed of the 4 of them. They have a game designer, which is not the same skill. So I'm just going to hope that whoever's managing that is going to do a good job there. That's also worth saying that some things in the trailer aren't actually in the demo. Like there was like a box that was moved in the trailer that wasn't present in the demo. So it's good to know that they're they're going to add more things. It's not going to be so simple and easy. I think the only thing they need to get down is level design, and that's pretty much the only thing they need to make a good game. I think the rest of everything works well enough. Everything else is more like a minor problem and not like a big deal that would ruin the whole game. Overall, not currently impressed with the current level design. Maybe it's more of a personal thing. It's just hyper casual. Like there's really no challenge to it at all. It feels like almost like a time waster, right? Like there's no sense of progression really, because the puzzles don't get harder because they're all incredibly easy. They're all the same amount of like you just get to the place, you just jump over the thing and then it works, right?
It's like those common apps, like just kind of repeating the same sort of task. Yeah. I guess. Well, it depends, right? Because I think those at least those tend to be like the ones I'm thinking of at least tend to be like those like endless scroller games, for example, right? Where like you just the map will usually randomly generate, right? And that happens endlessly, and things tend to get harder, right? Maybe more obstacles, maybe moving faster, it makes it harder to dodge obstacles, however it works, right? But with this, it actually was just stagnant. It was actually just easy throughout the entire thing. So I don't know if it's exactly the same. Maybe there's I'm sure there's some games like that, like that fit the whole like mobile category like that. But yeah, I'd say it's overall pretty impressive for people. It's like on a technical level, it's good, right? It's very confident. It's just like, can they get the game theory down, right? Can they get the level design going? I think that's really it. So that's all I have to say about the game. Oh, I'm going to post a link to it. The Steam, because it's free, right? So if anyone wants to play the demo and see it for themselves, what I'm talking about, put that in the chat. There be. Also, we've also got someone who stopped in on Twitch. Welcome. I hope your day has been well. We need more Twitch people. We got a YouTube top heavy thing, and the Twitch community's got to represent better on the mixed media live stream. So welcome.
Yep.
Cool. Is that it?
Yeah. I also post the link to their Discord
Oh, cool.
because they post like updates and stuff like that. So
Yeah, maybe we can get some devs. If you guys actually like the interview style, I know it went on really long, and I apologize deeply for that. But if you guys want us to do more interviews, like with composers or game developers, it'd be really cool to have the Derpy Conga team sort of collide with our live stream. That'd be super cool. Pick their brains and see how they even got to the point where they were able to release a full game, because doing that alone is already a pretty big achievement. It's pretty awesome.
yep.
Cool. So is it sign off time?
Yeah, I guess so. Oh, any news or industry? I have news.
I posted in the Discord, but on the Scarlett Johansson front, it turns out that there's an email exchange between Scarlett Johansson's representation and some people from Disney, basically acknowledging that they told her that they were planning on simultaneously releasing on Disney Plus. They recognized in the emails that would be a breach of contract, essentially, and then they said, we're going to renegotiate our deal with you so that we can do it the way we wanted to do it. But then they just didn't do that. So it seems, before I wasn't so sure how this was going to go, but that's pretty damning unless there's some way to explain all of that in a way that makes sense. But yeah, that's the update from ScarJo and Disney.
Yep. For the video game stuff, Blizzard's getting sued to death for I think there is some sexual harassment stuff going on in their office, or alleged stuff. Stock is like down a lot, and it's like been the biggest thing for like a long time, maybe the past week or so. As well, Amazon, as you may have known, they paid Crytek to essentially give them the source code for what do you call it, CryEngine, right? So they can make a fork of it. And now it's open source because I guess I don't know why, but it's run now. Okay, it's really weird, right? So it used to be called Amazon Lumberyard. Now it's called like open something 3D. I don't remember. Open 3D Engine, is that what it is? And what's weird is it's being managed in part by like the Linux Foundation or something like that. I'm like, what? What happened? How did this happen? I think it's the Linux Foundation. Let me verify this. The Linux Foundation Open 3D Engine. Yes, the Linux Foundation will oversee the project and form the Open 3D Foundation to accelerate collaboration with game developers to enhance the AAA game engine. So yeah, I think I could be wrong though. The Linux Foundation now essentially owns this, right? And Amazon will be contributing, which I assume means they essentially have at least some control because they're going to be the big contributor, right? They're essentially the worker, right? They have to be appeased, in some varieties, stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know why that's happening, but it's happening.
Yeah. Any news in the music world?
I don't know. Nothing that I'm really aware of, other than I guess Disney announced yesterday that they're making a season 2 of Bad Batch, so we get some more Kevin Kiner.
Awesome. Yeah. And your thing about CryEngine reminded me about other gaming news, because I was thinking about film stuff. Facebook, if you didn't know, owns a company called Oculus, which was one of the original VR companies. VR has kind of been this weird, ugly duckling of the gaming world because no one seems to be able to figure out how to like break through. And that's still a problem, but Facebook ventured in with Oculus. They make the headsets. And the odd thing is that they had Oculus exclusives. Um, so basically games that you could only play on Oculus headsets, right? And that seemed to be what Facebook's monetary plan was, just to sell games with their development studios. They started buying up development studios and doing their Facebook thing, which is buy and consume and whatever. So that seemed to be the plan. Then they announced all of a sudden there were going to be no more exclusives, but that they were going to focus on this concept called the Omniverse, which sounds like the really creepy thing.
It's called the multiverse, was it not?
Oh, maybe
I could be misremembering.
Yeah. Do you know the news story then?
Yes.
Yeah.
It is called the multiverse. Yes.
Yeah. So their idea is that they're going to change their platform to open source, right? That's why it reminded me. But obviously, because they are the managers of the project, they're going to be contributing almost all of the code, I'm sure. They made the project open source. And their idea is that they want all devices, not just Facebook devices, to be able to be connected simultaneously to this constant virtual world, essentially. So, like, no matter if I have an Oculus device or I have an HTC device or whatever other company's making a headset, they want everyone to be connected. They're kind of the thing is they say they want these other companies to contribute, but the way they're talking about it is as if they're automatically going to contribute. It sounds like they're going to throw around their weight is really what I'm thinking, to force this omniverse sort of thing or whatever, multiverse, whatever the heck is called, to happen. Sounds very Matrix-like. I kind of want to just poke it with a fire stick and run away. Can you imagine?
The news source says it's called Metaverse, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, I actually think that's right. It's the Metaverse, yeah.
Okay.
And so the universe on top of our reality, I guess, is the idea. And it really just sounds like they're just going to try to do what they do with social media, except even more immersive, where you are kind of hooked on the platform, you spend large amounts of your time on the platform, spend large amounts of time on the metaverse, so they can extract information about you. With VR, there's a little bit more information, including your motor habits, which is kind of bizarre. With Oculus products, they're mobile, so you can be walking around anywhere or be anywhere with Oculus products or your location. They already take this information. This is already known. They just rolled out like a month ago, maybe their in-stream advertising program, meaning like if you're playing a game, if there's a billboard in the game, it will be dynamically changed to something that Facebook has procured, which is actually like I don't have necessarily, it's a novel concept. The problem is the larger concept that kind of inhabits of basically trying to take as much data from you as possible so that they can serve you ads in game now, which they're trying to make the norm. So it's kind of interesting. We'll see how it goes. We'll see if the Matrix is created.
Yeah, we'll see. I actually forgot there's more news. There was the Apple, and Google and whatever versus Epic Games thing is still happening, and turns out that through some emails that Google had to fork over for the court stuff. Turns out that Google was looking to buy Epic Games when they put Fortnite on their store, which is interesting. That's just kind of weird, Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. All right. So, is that it?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, thank you so much for watching. If you've stuck around the stream for this long, you are the real one. Why not join us on Discord is my next question. Link is in the description. Pop It community. We're going to be chatting all week, amongst each other about stuff that's happening in film, media, gaming, music, literally anything. We'd like to have more people who have a little more diversity in the arts that they occupy. So if you're a painter, whatever, ballet dancer, right? Get in the Discord. and speak about your art. We want to hear it, and we want to share with each other. Last thing I'll say is if you like this podcast, if you enjoy the fact that we review other people's stuff and chat with them and whatever, leave us a comment to tell us what you like or don't like, and hit the like or dislike button. If you really don't like it that much, at least hit the dislike button so that I can know, so we can know what we should do, that we should be doing better and striving for more. So with that said, I'll wish you guys a good week.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.